long. Okay.
Hello, welcome to Toolkit Live, oral storytelling with Soretti. I would like to acknowledge the Minjungbal people of the Banjar traditional owners of the stolen land on which I am living and dreaming on today. And I extend that respect to the traditional owners of the lands of wherever this broadcast may reach. I am on land that is a place of ancient ceremonies of celebration, initiation, renewal, and storytelling. And today, as we share our thoughts, insights, and knowledge practices, may we pay respect to the deep knowledge, the oldest knowledge embedded within Aboriginal communities and their ownership of country. My name is Manisha Anjali. I am an artist, writer, and I've been facilitating the Toolkit's performance poetry stream this year. Today, I have the honor of speaking with Soretti, an Oromo storyteller, facilitator, and activist. She has authored 2 books of poetry, released multimedia work independently and collaboratively. Her work is featured across the country and on occasion abroad. Currently, a young leader in the Oromo struggle for self-determination, working predominantly with the coalition Wala Bumu, Complete Liberation. Thank you for joining me today, Soretti.
Thanks for having me, Manisha. I'm super happy I could be here.
Thank you. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Toolkits is a 12-week program for writers aged 30 and under to develop their skills in a unique online environment. Toolkits is run by Express Media, who have been around for 30 years, developing, supporting, and promoting young writers through workshops that develop skills, through opportunities for constructive feedback and publication, and through awards and programs that recognize excellence. And the Toolkits program is generously supported by the copyright agency Cultural Fund. This session will be available on YouTube as a resource and will be captioned in the coming days. If you'd like to ask any questions, you can do so on Twitter using the hashtag EMToolkits or via the live chat section on YouTube. And I encourage you to do so. We'll go through questions at the end of the session. Today, we will be looking at Soretti's poetry, oral storytelling practice and tradition. And we get to look at Namummaa fi Wantoota Namummaa Qancarsan, Soretti's most recent visual offering, in the language of resistance. So, the poetry of storyteller, facilitator, activist Soretti Kadir is a dynamic and authentic and heartful experience, seeking revolution, liberation, and freedom. With Soretti's poetry, there is a fire from which the voice originates. There is music in her diction. There's a rhythm derived from imagination, history, intuition, and justice. She invites individuals and communities to walk the path of truth. And such is the mark of a true storyteller, being someone who inspires change through art. Soretti, your artistry is something that demands respect as it comes from a non-negotiable place of authenticity. Witnessing your performance is a sensory experience. For those who witness you are forever changed. You walk into a room a certain way, you experience Soretti's poetry, and you leave as a changed person. Your performance is like an awakening spell, and the confidence with which you embody story. It's a spirit that speaks to and changes the deepest parts of ourselves. And it is an honor to speak with you today. Soretti, how did you first come to harness the power of voice? Did you have a moment where you realized that the throat, the tongue, and the voice was an instrument that wielded power for you?
I think it has a lot to do with the community that I grew up in. So I migrated to Australia, Southern Australia, when I was about 2 years old, and from probably about that time, or maybe the age of like 4 or 5, where I have some conscious memory of it, I was, amongst a community that was made up of mostly political refugees whose understanding of their current location was connected to that of like, yes, we're here for refuge and safety, but also we're here to use these resources to try and change our conditions as Oromo people back in Ethiopia. And so growing up in that kind of social environment, it was really early on that one, I identified myself as someone who was a part of a movement for justice. And then I guess once you identify that, and once you identify that you care that you're part of that, you start to think, what can I use to contribute? And so like speaking generally was something I started to do quite young. And that was really encouraged by my community, probably from the age of like, I don't know, like 13, 14. I was in contexts where I was using my voice, and I realized I could do it well, do with some competence. So that continued on into my early adulthood when I left high school, and through high school. And then I started to negotiate more with that when I left the first iteration of my career, which was international aid and development when I first left high school, where I was using mostly the form of speeches and just communicating words in that way. And as I was leaving that, the negotiation was I wanted my medium to allow more space for what I wanted to say, away from, I guess, the audience's expectations of who I was or what I wanted to communicate. So I came to poetry. I'd always liked writing, and I just took it a little more seriously. And again, it had to do with community, because I met a community of people who were writing and were performing and who were creating space for that. And using that as sort of an incubator, I discovered poetry, and that's kind of been the trajectory of how I've come to know, I guess, my voice as something that I can actively use to impact people.
Right, the voice as an instrument of power, and I love how you started at such an early age as well, and an early age to grab that kind of power. And part of what I feel like sets you apart as a storyteller is that through poetry and through voice, that you make the intimacy a communal experience. So it is evident that the impact that your community has on you, because you create a sense of community with every performance, I feel. And using the oldest form of storytelling, oral storytelling, I feel like poets since the beginning of time have sought to create that intimate communal experience that we get to experience with you. I'm really interested in oral storytelling traditions of the world. I always have seen the poet as a messenger, someone who crosses realms to bring messages for evolution, political or spiritual evolution for the society in which the poet exists. I'm curious, what do some Oromo traditions of oral storytelling look like? And do you draw from these traditions yourself?
You make me miss it, Manisha. It's been a long time since I've been in the kind of environment what you describe, and there is like a really specific beauty to just the moment. It's not, and it's the moments before, the moments afterwards. You're kind of back in in the normal workings of relationship with human beings. But when you do have the opportunity to let people into that world with sound and with story, you're reminding me right now, because it's been a while since I've performed. You're reminding me just how unique of an experience it is. I think I was not intentionally when I started performing, but although I said like my use of voice or storytelling, let's say, was first encouraged by the Oromo community in the diaspora where I grew up, and it's continued to be encouraged by that community. Though I didn't have sort of, other than Oromo music, which I'll share a little bit now as some of the examples of the origins of this, or what this traditional storytelling looks like. I didn't really have, tangible examples of of how my storytelling could look like, or almost storytelling. But in just naturally growing in the craft, there are many similarities between the forms of storytelling, oral storytelling of Geresa and of Yatello, that my style of delivery mimics. I don't know whether that's just intuitive or whether it's because it's, I also speak Afan Oromo, and there is sort of an exchange, maybe unconsciously, that happens when I'm speaking in English, but I also do speak Afan Oromo in some of my poetry as well. But there's definitely a relationship. So I'll go ahead and I'll share some bits. I'll share my screen right now. Let's hope we get this right. So this first little bit that I'm going to share is this is music, but the parts I'm going to share from the music are they're called Gerersa or Yadelo, and they're Yadelo. Sorry, I pronounced it wrong, guys. If there are any Oromos watching this or watch it in the future, forgive me. And they're age old. They're age old. They used to be used in all sort of social environments, whether when it was people going out for battle or returning, or childbirth or marriage, or even just progressing in age group, or death, or so many contexts where oral storytelling would be used as a way of commemorating the moment, of a way of celebration, mourning, etc., just a way of expressing emotion. So this is a piece by Janet Dinkel, and I'll just play. So that's traditionally used in the women's Sikhe context. So the Sikhe is an institution connected to the Oromo system of social democracy called the Gada system. It's incorrect for me to say Sikhe. It's connected to Gada. It's a part of. It's the women's institution space for pursuing justice, resolving conflicts amongst themselves and the broader community. And this is a guerrera that is sort of evoking that experience. So that's one, and I'll just show you another one. And we used a lot of this song in the film that we're going to watch a little bit later. And this is connected a little bit more to how Oromo Oromo music, or Oromo art today, and actually since its inception, has been used as a vehicle for seeking justice and communicating repression. And I really love this getter a lot. Oromia lafuma Oromo manafuma yaduma kawetumu dumijani dumu bara wanka bolin kabawanda bolin da bakana yantuma kabune gina chabu bara. So it's quite short, but it gives you an example of sort of the rhythmic nature, how even if you don't understand the language, it has the power to sort of evoke something in you. And this is, so the Oromo are an oral society, and used oral communication until the 1900s, really, before any sort of written language was. Let me just unshare my screen so I can do that. Thank you. So you can imagine how integral it was to all facets of society that there were multiple modes, I guess, or forms for us to preserve identity, story, whether that's at a familial level about your ancestry or whether that's at a community level about certain events. So those forms that I just showed you, those snippets, that rhythm and that I guess that poetic form that's called Guerreza Yadelos was one of the ways that this transmission was, I guess, was happening. And again, like I said, it's not something I intentionally tried to take into my form of work, but it definitely showed up. And as it showed up, I definitely focused on it more and more.
I like how so many poets, like, we end up creating something that has unconsciously been influenced by something that came before us or perhaps was around us. Like, sometimes I think of language as an entity that almost like inhabits us, and that we communicate with it through time in ways that we don't even realize, and becoming a vessel for poetry to really move through in ways that mystify ourselves. And part of what I think is the beauty of poetry and all forms of communication. Thank you for sharing those.
I think it's such a surreal experience. I don't know. It's not something that can really be. Maybe I'm just saying this because I'm not saying put into words. It's been a while since I have, because of COVID and just sort of life. It's been a while since I've experienced it. But what I do really remember is the connection formed with audiences and people. And I don't know whether it's because there's such a stagnation in, I guess, our ability to feel things really fully in just what is our society today, hyper-capitalist, hyper-individualistic, just sort of this rigidness and distance and separation. I don't know whether that is why sort of the outpouring of the spirit that happens when you share. Because when you write, like, you're not really thinking about whether something is too vulnerable, whether something is, whether you'd be comfortable sharing or not. It's a decision you make. Well, at least I make afterwards. And if you do decide to share it, like, you're sharing from the place of intimacy in which you created and you were seeking some sort of connection to help you through something. I can speak for myself when I say that, and so I think that's the same thing that imprints on people when they experience it. And it's again, it's been a while. It's been like 2 years, but it was special for that reason. Like, because this sounds super cliche, but like, I really love people. I really love people, and I think the thing I loved so much about performing was that I got to show people I love them.
That's so beautiful, and the people love you. So you recently created an amazing, breathtaking film called Namummaa fi Wantoota Namummaa Qancarsan, Humanness and What Took It, which was screened at the Arts Centre last year. And I believe you have a snippet from the film to show us.
Yeah, I do. I didn't know what part to show, so I'm just going to show two parts. Let me show my screen again. There you go. All right. So I'll show just the beginning. Maybe I'll say a little bit about the film first. Should I, or should I do that later?
Oh, yeah, go for it now. Yeah.
Okay. I'll just talk a little about how it came about so that there's some context to what people are seeing. It was just in the wake of the assassination of Haacaaluu Hundeessaa, who we'll talk a little bit more about as the session progresses, that I, was confirmed that I had the opportunity to make this film. Making film was something I'd wanted to do for some time. And so, again, in the wake of this assassination and wanting at that time, actually, every creative effort or advocacy effort that I was making, wanting that to be connected, the sort of, his legacy and seeking this overall justice that he was seeking and that we're all seeking as Oromo people, this film came about as a dedication to him. And so the first part you see is this sort of what we try to do to capture the Oromo experience in some way. The second part is some of the monologue that we wrote, sort of in dialogue with this. What I wrote in dialogue with this theme of witnessing another human being take away your humanness and wanting to talk to that in a way. And just a little bit at the end where one of the characters in the film, Wantoota Namummaa, reflects on Haacaaluu's legacy from her own words.
Before this time, I know we were in agreement. But you have become something I do not recognize. And I know what it means to become a thing willingly just for the sake of knowing it. And that which I see in you is not foreign even within the thresholds of my own heart. Garu, keessa kana beekuu fi irra deebi'eetiin itti dhiyaachuun narra hin jiru. Akkamitti kana ofirratti raawwattu naaf ta'e.
Fayyaa nagaa dhabinaa.
Even before I met him, I felt like he was my friend. I think that's how a lot of Oromos feel about him because of who he was and what he embodied. But the last time I saw him was last summer in Finfinne. I asked him a question about how it is that he knows all of this history about the Oromo, and how all of this history that he knows is completely at odds with the history and with the narratives and with the images that the Ethiopian state has put out about the Oromo people. And he laughed, and then he just kind of said to me, you know, I don't rely on the Ethiopian state to tell me who I am. I listen to the stories and to the history that my ancestors tell me. And that really, I feel like that embodies his whole spirit.
I think we'll...
Yeah, wow. So I'd love to hear more about Haacaaluu Hundeessaa and what the experience was in the wake of his assassination, because his assassination on June 29. This film was screened on in November 2020, so there wasn't that much time for you to make this as well.
Yeah. It's a privilege to talk about him and to keep talking about him and what he meant to, and what the moments after he was assassinated meant to us, and what it I guess the fire it lit in our community. So Haacaaluu was born in Ambo, which is a town that is kind of known notoriously for generations of really staunch resistance against the Ethiopian Empire. And he was like many people of his age group in that time, he was herding cattle as a young boy, and was, I guess at that point, just through day-to-day life, honing this skill of storytelling. He'd be singing and telling stories as he was going about his day-to-day. And again, like many Oromo people, experienced incarceration at a really young age while he was still in high school for some of his student activism. And when he came out of prison, he started writing more songs, and again honing more of his skill storytelling and writing music while he was in prison. And then when he came out, sort of launched into his career, launched his first album. And it was during the 2015, I think, Oromo protest. So they went from about 14 until really like 17 to 18, until we saw the end of the 27-year dictatorship in Ethiopia by the TPLF, or the coalition of the EPIDF. And I'm just throwing terms out there, but you know, this was the system there at the time that he was resisting. So in that time, that's when one of his tracks, Malanjira, which translates to, you know, what is my existence, or do I exist, which was part love song, but also like part historical archive, speaking to the moment of resistance that people were in. And I use this, the term I'm about to use has been used by many people in articles, in interviews, and talking about him, but music really became a soundtrack of a revolution. That's the term I'm talking about. And, you know, he continued on to kind of serve in this way. His art form continued on to serve in this way. And in, you know, just before his assassination, that last scene that you saw there was from the last public interview that he gave, which, you know, is highly speculated, and I, you know, really agree with his speculations. I don't think they're just speculations. Was the kind of the last straw, I guess, the empire was going to take from him. That interview, I mean, and you know, his existence was critical of the state. It's not really, it didn't really matter what he said or what he did. His desire to live unapologetically, his, you know, his amplification of Oromo struggle on all its spectrums, from peaceful struggle to the armed struggle, him standing by his people and being and never sort of negotiating. And you know, we'll look at, actually I'll show you now what I mean when I say never negotiating with the truth, was always going to, I guess, lead the empire to doing this, to assassinating him. So in the wake of his assassination, or when he was assassinated, I really, you know, the best way I can describe it is that, you know, this there's 50 million or 40 million plus, 40 to 50 million people. Really, every heart stood still at the same time. There was this sort of, on the streets in Finfinne, the Oromo name for the capital of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, and everywhere people were just flooding into the streets, crying all night together. It was this communal grief. The next morning, people on foot from tens of kilometers away were coming into the capital city for what they expected to be his burial, which was another shamble, another disrespect and dishonor to his memory, that because of the way the state handled it. But you saw a scene in the first snippet I showed where there was this flooding rush of people on the streets. Those are people walking with his body on the streets. There were protests, of course. There was anger, there was rage, there was disbelief, and then there was resolve, I think, that set in. I think it ignited, and I don't believe I'm alone in this thought, that his assassination was what has ignited the last chapter of the Oromo struggle, as it is, and has driven it to the point where it is seeking really complete and utter liberation from the Ethiopian Empire. And it's also because this is not the first time this has happened. When he was assassinated, there are people still alive today with memory of assassinations, collective that affected the collective similarly in the past, or people whose families or in their families who had experienced similar things in the past and even in the last couple of years. So it wasn't, it was just this realization that, like, okay, like for me, I can say it was like, when I have children, which I'd love to have kids, they're going to be Oromo. They will know of themselves as this identity. But do I want to pass on the struggle? I don't. So it is that kind of finality that occurred. So let me just share a quick snippet. Is everything okay, guys? I thought you were looking at me, Manisha, as like.
I'm just really captivated by the story of Haacaaluu. Just deep listening, Soretti.
Okay, good. So I thought someone was on my screen. All right, so this was a performance he gave right after that 27-year dictatorship had fallen, and this new government had come in, which a lot of people had hope in at the very beginning, but very quickly showed itself to be, no different. In fact, worse in many ways. Perhaps in the way that it was most of us, that we were all expecting so much better, and so that the fact that there was really no change, but further, this was again someone or people seeking power, over a map, when we thought this was the beginning of what was going to be some kind of freedom. So this moment is a concert at that time in history, and this is him on stage using, again, Gerersa, the form of oral storytelling that we were talking about.
Gerar naan jettu meeka'ee tadeelure badi naan jettu meeka'ee qajeelure ani maala geeraraa tanoo yaada yeelala dhiirri geeraree quufne hidhaa qaallitti jira dhiirri geeraree quufne hidhaa qiliixoo jira dhiirri geeraree quufne hidhaa karchallee jira karchallee amboo jira. Anu malang gerara, tanu yada yelala, tanu yada yelala. Ya jolle banne raka, gurrabba ganne raka. Oromo malum gochudi dere. Yadde hamma dandenyu.
I think that if I'm gonna stop it at some point, I'll just let it play until it finishes, to be honest with you. But I mean, I guess you can see there, like, the people in the crowd. There was a close-up on a man's face when he says, so he's saying, a man does not recite this poetry and be fulfilled as my brothers, let's say, are in, and he names a prison, the name of a prison where there are There are Oromo people, political prisoners at that time. So he's really unsettled by this contrast. I mean, I guess this contradiction, and he's bringing that contrast to light. That we're supposed to be celebrating this change, but at the beginning it says gerer nanjedu. They're saying to speak poetry. They're telling me to speak poetry. And he goes malang gerera. What am I supposed to say? And he goes into sort of this recount of what is going on with these people right now. And if I let it go a little further, you would have seen, these top government officials in the room. Like, this is dangerous. This is not something that you are guaranteed to survive at a place like Ethiopia. But you see on his face, you don't see a sense of fear. You see this utmost courageousness, this fearlessness, this satisfaction even, right? That he's in this position speaking the truth. And this is really why they had to kill him. Because this is a force that you cannot stop. This is a force that this kind of fearlessness is not something, it's only something that will add fuel to our fire. Little did they know that killing him would ignite a fire that would never be extinguished. His music, from those in the cities to those in the armed struggle to, there wasn't a single person who was not mourning when, he was, and the other thing as well, that has happened, when we talk about the actual implications in the wake of his assassination, we saw a generation of young people in their thousands for 4+ years who were using means of peaceful struggle to resist this empire, and who after assassination said, I mean, look, if that's what's going to continue, you saw this influx into the Oromo Liberation Army from that point onward until this day. And so, you're seeing people, again, it's the finality. He was kind of like the straw that broke, for lack of a better term, the camel's back.
Yeah, wow. I'm so captivated by how his spirit pierces through the illusions, like the images generated by the state, because he knows the truth, and the truth was attained through deep listening to ancestors. And there is a true story that, in the face of a more controlled story, it doesn't shake, it doesn't falter. And what an inspiration. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks for letting me.
Amazing. So in terms of how you put the film together in such because it feels like the film is in real time. It is literally in the wake of his assassination. What I love about this film is the inclusion of other community members in the storytelling process. How did you go about recording their memories of Haacaaluu as told by the other characters, and who are they?
So initially when we had this opportunity from us into Melbourne to make this, it was supposed to be a live work, but because of COVID, it turned into a digital outcome of any kind. People did a whole bunch of different things. And because I was not in one place at the time in terms of like where I was living, decided to do it as a film, and the characters in there are also in different locations. So Dr. Kwe Kumsa, who is an elder in our community, she's based in Canada. Ayanto Tibeso, who's a friend of many, many years, PhD person. She's doing a PhD in Indigenous knowledge archiving. Brilliant to really be on this world. Aisha Tufa, who Nisha, you might even know her, is someone who has been a friend for a really long time, and we've really grown together a lot in this, I guess, in defining our ways of advocacy and activism. And she's so spectacular in all of her radicalness and her critique of everything around her. So in terms of bringing these characters into the process, we did I conducted I wouldn't call it an interview, but a series of conversations with each character. Like, sure, I knew them. Kwe Kumsa, I was really getting to know through this process, but Ayanto and Aisha had some previous relationship with. But instead of treating it as like, oh, I know these two characters and I don't know Kwe Kumsa, I said, let me ask these questions as if I wouldn't know any of their answers. So I asked a series of questions over about 2 conversations each, where they're just really just conversations where I was, asking them how they would respond to certain prompts and the like. And from there, started to form some kind of dialogue between us and them with the themes of the film independently. So there are some parts in the film where Aisha talks directly to the themes of the film by herself. As you saw, there is that part where Ayantu speaks at the end. There's the part where Kue is doing, the prayers, and she's in dialogue with me through the film. So it was kind of a jigsaw process in terms of piecing it all together, but that was how I kind of brought their narratives into the film. In terms of like actually practically putting the film together, so this was a co-production, co-direction effort between myself and my cousin, who I grew up with as my sister, Idili Abba Umar. She was co-directing, co-producing. There was Amy Brown from the Art Centre, who's been super supportive even after the process, after we finished the commission with the Art Centre. And then there's the whole team. There's Julia, who did the animation. There's Tim. I mean, it was such a collaborative effort, and also because it was across continents. I was filming, at the time I was filming in Nairobi. Some of it was filmed in Melbourne. And then, so the recordings were of Kue Kumsa's prayer, for example, on her phone, sent it through. Then with Ayantu's pieces, then with Aisha's, and then syncing. So it was such a, like, I don't even know how we got to the end. It was one of those processes when you're in it, you're like, what will this look like? But we had an amazing team that, like, every time we brought an idea and we're like, oh, can we have animations talking to a real person? They're like, yeah, I guess so. And they made it happen. So yeah, it was really that collaboration that saw it come to life.
It's really beautiful, and there is something in hearing the individual voices of the characters as themselves, and like I did get the sense that everyone was in a different place, but there was this narrative that brought them together, and yeah, it was beautiful. I also wanted to ask about when the film. There's a gentle musical like incantation that is there at the beginning and end. The one where the English translation is peace, cattle and humans in peace, children and calves in peace. I was wondering if that was created for the film, or is that an existing piece that was pulled in to the film?
That's an existing prayer that Oromo people have been using for, I guess, time immemorial, that I learned through Kue Kumsa. So when I say she's really a cultural archive, not just in her sort of professional work, but just, in the many years that she's been alive, she's accumulated this knowledge and has kept it. So no, it's an actual prayer that, we use.
Yeah, that was, I felt that it was a prayer, because there was this feeling that sort of came up that was like very innate and ancient, and just that feeling that you can't explain, and that feeling that I have when I hear prayers from my own culture as well. It's just that feeling is the same.
Yeah. I guess the heart of it, is the desire for peace amongst all things and amongst all of creation. There's a friend of mine used to say to me, over this year, we talk a lot about our own faiths and how they are not, we don't practice Wag-e-Fata, the traditional religion of the Oromo people, but how connected we feel, and how being Oromo is what also connects us to God in our walks, with faith. And he says, back in the day they used to always say, Oromo wa kan be beta, like Oromos know who God is. No matter sort of what. I think that is what is really resonating in that prayer. Although I don't know many. Yeah, I don't know. Even the word naga and its constant use is something that's really common in the language and colloquial speaking and such. And I don't know, there are many things that can be said about it. But yeah, I feel you. I think, yeah, there's something ancient and deep about it.
Yeah, really, really beautiful. And something that even if if I heard it without the subtitles, the translation there as well, I feel like it would be understood in a way that's not language, that I feel like it is in the sound and the incantation and the repetition. A piece, a prayer for peace. Yeah. But yeah, thank you for this film. It's an incredible homage. The death of a revolutionary to be carried in these poems and storytelling in this way and in real time. And the film carries on with what Haacaaluu was doing for Oromo consciousness and humanness. And the fact that he was also an artist and a musician, such a testament to the power of rhythm, of poetry in uniting the collective imagination. And it sounds like he really, really united the collective imagination. What an amazing, important work. I'm wondering, how can we access the film? Will it be available to see anywhere in the future?
Yeah, it will be. We've been planning for it to be for a while. We're trying to. I think it's just going to be on YouTube. To be honest, I think we've trialed all the ways to get it out there, and so I guess you can. I mean, I'm on social media, and once it is up, I will, I guess, post it on my social media. It's not up and available yet though, but in the near, very, 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 very near future, like even maybe next week, we'll put it up on YouTube. It's been too long.
Okay. I'll keep my eye out for it. I think everybody should watch it. It's incredible. So as you say strongly in the film, like one of the lines is like, freedom is not negotiable. I thought we could have a little discussion on social justice and poetry as a language of resistance, as a language of dissidence, as a language of freedom. Protest signs, chants, I feel, are poems. Would you say poetry is one way to explore this idea of humanness against the ones who have taken the humanness away?
Yeah, I guess if you want to, like if you want to make that exploration, which before his assassination, when I wrote the concept of this piece, which turned out to be a film, as I said, it was supposed to be otherwise at the beginning, I was much more interested in that exploration than I was after his assassination. But I still wanted to commit to that challenge in some way. But that idea of, okay, even within that exploration, has to be something that is not negotiable. There has to be like something standing as human beings that like we fight for, that like I can't just let you take away from me and my give it because I'm in the face of another human being. That was the idea. Is like when the end of the day, an oppressor is in the face of a human being, in my face or in the face of my people or any people around the world that they're oppressing. And it was, I did want to step into the narrative from really a place of naivety, because sure, I have all of this discourse and I have all of this language and learning and experience to tell me why systems of oppression exist, how they came about to be, what, like, that there is a greed and an obsession and a need for power and capital, and that's at the center of it, and that this is why exploitation is around. But there's always this part of me, and I was quite rebuking of that part of me up until making this work. There's always that part of me that was like, yeah, but like you're still people. So how are you doing this? Like, why are you doing this? And particularly in our context as Oromo people, we for a long time, even right now, the people who are wielding the tools of oppression against us are our own people. More than almost it is, well, what we see at least, right? I mean, there's an ideology and again, a history that came from elsewhere, sure. But there are people making choices now that deny others of their humanness, and those people are very much related to the people they're harming. And even without that relation there was this question of like, but why, y'all? Like just real, like me just forgetting everything that I know is true, and I knew even in the moment of making that work was like why don't you see me when I and so if I'm asking why don't you see me, maybe I need to make the effort to see you. So this is why I say before Haacaaluu was assassinated, it's much more interested in this question than after he's assassinated, because I was angry, I was enraged, I'm still enraged, but I still wanted to keep to that challenge. And when you ask, is poetry a good method to use it? The reason I say is like if you want to, it's like any method is a good way, is a good, even conversation or your own thoughts. But I don't blame anyone for not wanting to put that hand out, because why? Like if it's just gonna be cut off. But for me, poetry or my creative work is a space where I could just be free of everything that I think I know, of sort of every worldly knowledge, and just have a conversation with my creator, and then share that with the rest of the world. And at that time, my conversation with my creator was just like, this is before Haacaaluu assassination, when I was in Ethiopia. I was there for 6 months and intending to go back, but then he was assassinated, so that wasn't possible. But my question for a long time actually was just like, yo, why? Like, yeah, so it was the safest place, I guess. That's why I turned to poetry, to have that conversation. But again, after his assassination, there was this boundary that I drew in even letting myself ask those questions. And I'm still negotiating with it, by the way. I'm still negotiating with it. Absolutely. Like I was I rode a wave of emotion for a good 8 months or more after his assassination. And then there came a place where I was like, well, I still haven't really answered this question. And I haven't answered it in terms of like, how do I embody the what I know to be true, I guess, no matter what I see of people, what I know to be true of like you and me, and the essence of you and me and everyone else, and how to treat people in that way, and how to embrace people from that truth, but also how to deal with the harm, with so much harm, and how to deal with these real, right, and really just like intense, demanding questions of freedom, which must be answered. Like they must be. That's that freedom is not negotiable. Is that Oromia must be free. At the same time, what we're getting free of, I don't know. You see, this is where the words get strange, because I don't know, but we must be free.
We must be free. I'm curious to see how this journey unfolds for you, and I think it's interrogating that space, that poetic space, and asking the why will lead us to the next stage, the evolution. And perhaps there won't be answers, perhaps there will be a series of doors or tunnels, and to see what actually happens with the struggle now that the assassination being such a recent sort of thing, and how in this realm, how the events unfold and how expression unfolds from that as well. We have a question we've got two questions. The first one is, what advice can you give, Soretti, to young poets and performers wanting to or struggling to find their voice in their performance?
First of all, I really hear you. It's not easy, but what I would say is that, okay, for me, when I started out, I don't think that my voice, nor the narrative that I was pushing out there, was super authentic, to be honest. But I put it out there anyway, and that was the only way I could have figured anything out. So I guess what I'm saying is just start. And it really starts in your writing, by the way. Like, how vulnerable can you get in your writing, and with how much assurance can you say that what I'm writing is true for me now? Not for anyone else, not for anything else, but what I'm writing is really true for me now. And then from there, I think as you build the courage to share this, the sort of what is going to be unique to you and your voice in this on the stage in performance will develop. Like I can guarantee that it will develop on its own. But you need to become comfortable with the fact that it's not going to start out perfect. You're not going to be proud of every moment, but that the only way for you to give yourself the opportunity to grow is to start. So I'm not sure where this person is based or sort of what your artistic community looks like, but if there are open mics or if there are other storytelling venues that you can use as opportunities to start sharing your work, this is by and large the best way for you to develop, and also your voice will change. Your voice will change. I think I've been performing for something like 7 years, and I sound nothing, and I write nothing, and my narrative's nothing like when I started. Yeah. So just give yourself a shot, just the way you are right now, and see what happens.
Thank you. That's great advice. One more question. What was the process of developing a performance piece into a film like? What did you learn from the process of transcribing one creation into another form?
It was a lot of fun. That's the first thing I think of. I think, okay, I think why I perhaps leaned towards poetry and stayed in it for as long as I did is like you have a lot of control, creative control over what you do, how you do it, what it looks like, what it sounds like, every intonation in your voice, everything. You sort of, and if something doesn't come out the way you wanted it, you can look back at yourself and be like, what do I change to fix that? So I guess the thing I learned most through this was working with what it's like working with a team to bring a creative vision to life. And that was so necessary because I just didn't have the skills to do much of what we needed to do to bring that about. And in that process, there will always be some gaps, right? In terms of what you thought was going to happen in your head. Or, for example, like, performing to a camera and it looking a little different in your mind to what it turns out to look like. And then when you put it into the film, making those negotiations, moving things around, like it was just, I had to really let go of a lot of my standards. Not that this did not mean my standards, but my expectations of myself in terms of what makes a good piece of work. It just had to come back to like, does this have the impact that I want it to have, despite little inconsistencies here and there with these ginormous standards of perfection that I had. So that's probably what I learned working with a team, and yeah, just learning how to be okay with certain things not looking a certain way.
Great. Thank you, Soretti. Yeah, I can imagine it's quite a different process from that individual control that we do have in our independent poetry practices. But such magic comes about when you work collaboratively and you've got the energies of all these different souls bringing one vision to life, which is still at the end of the day your vision.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you can relate to it, Manisha, because you do it.
All right, so we've actually run out of time. Thank you, Soretti, for your wisdoms that you have shared today. It's been such an honor to get to know more about your practice, the oral storytelling traditions, and Haacaaluu as well.
Thank you so much for having me, Manisha. It's really been lovely to talk to you, and yeah, it's just been awesome, and I'm happy to have been able to share.
Thank you. Everyone, just a reminder that this session will be available on YouTube as a resource, and it will be captioned in the coming days if you'd like to revisit tonight's conversation. Tomorrow evening, Wednesday, 27 October at 6 p.m, our poetry facilitator, Eleanor Gomez, will be joined by Pamela Brown for the next Toolkits Live, The Lives of Poets. You can tune in on the Express Media YouTube page. Thank you and good night.